All right. Hi and welcome everyone. My name is Jason Padilla and I'm your technical host for today's webinar. Just so you know that I'm doing the live stream right now, and so that's currently what's happening. And so if you're seeing weird on my screen, that's what's going on currently. So I'm putting back my slides, and hopefully you all can still see it well. Perfect. I think we're good to go with that. Sorry about that. I would like to give a special thank you to all our ASPB members who are attending today. Your ASPB membership dues help support making this webinar possible. For any of you who have not yet joined ASPB, you can join today and use the discount code %10 to receive a 10% discount. And on registration, ASPB members get early access to this webinar. You can learn more about ASPB and the opportunities we provide at aspb.org. Please be sure to check out our YouTube channel where you can find many other previously recorded webinars. We have plenty of them and they're all often super helpful and helping you stay on top of the things that are happening within our community and the Appliance Science network. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items to make sure you get the most out of attending today's webinar. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please let us know about those by using the chat box or emailing me at jpadilla@aspb.org. If you have questions for our guest speakers, please add them to the Zoom Q&A section. Our moderator will be sharing with them with our presenters. And so we'll have Q&A time at the end of the webinar. If you have trouble connecting or need to leave the webinar early, know that a recording of this webinar will be made available on our YouTube channel. Please be sure again to follow our YouTube channel to receive notification when new content are posted. Sterling Field is with us today to navigate your question and moderate our discussion. Sterling is a postdoctoral researcher in Relab Institute for Science at Stanford, and he leads the LGBTQ+ Scientist Network and advocates for LGBTQ visibility and support in STEM. Thank you again for moderating today's event, Sterling. And now I'll hand it over to you to kick us off.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you both Jason and to ASPB for organizing this great seminar. So I'm Sterling. I'm currently in California, but I did my graduate work in Tennessee and North Carolina. And so I have worked with LGBT groups as well as social justice organizations throughout the South, as well as I've seen how national support for these local communities can really make an impact, but also how devastating can be when national groups pull out from local communities in these southern regions. And so we're here today because ASPB has received feedback from the community about concerns that some may have as members of the LGBT community about traveling to Georgia for the plant biology meeting this year. In response, we've invited representatives from both the national organization of ASPB, the national organization oSTEM, or Out in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, as well as local organizations like the First City Pride, which is the Pride Center and Pride organization in Savannah, Georgia. And all of these people are here today to help provide both insight as well as help our community understand the importance of ASPB going to Savannah, Georgia, and having this conference there, but also to hear your comments and really understand where everyone's coming from. So first, to discuss ASPB's commitment to promoting a safe and welcoming space at Plant Biology, I'd like to introduce Leanne Thornton, ASPB's president-elect. She's a professor at the College of New Jersey. She runs a lab as well as teaches undergraduate courses and has engaged in training sessions for best practices in diversity, equity, and inclusion for improving teaching, mentoring, and social leadership. Leanne is committed to removing barriers to participating in the ASPB community. And with that, I'll give you over to Leanne.
Thank you, Sterling. I'm Leanne Thornton, she, her, and as Sterling said, I do firmly believe that the ASPB community is stronger when diverse perspectives are celebrated and encouraged. We all identify as plant biologists, and the meeting is a really important time for us to share our work and to learn from others through informal conversations as well as the formal scientific presentations. Our other identities enrich and expand the perspectives that we bring to plant biology research and education. And it's important that each attendee at the conference feels seen and supported in getting what they need. I chose to participate in this webinar because I want people to recognize me at the conference and to know that it's okay to stop me, say hello, ask me a question, or give me some advice. Let me know that there's something that we could do a little bit better. I will do my best to provide support in Savannah and to plan for improvements at other ASPB conferences. We're currently working on Plant Biology 24 already, and we've started the process of getting Plant Biology 25 going. I want to decrease any identity-related uncomfortable situations so that each attendee can thrive and get what they need as a plant biologist. So the slide that's showing lets you know that the ASPB has a few things going on that are important to the LGBTQ community. So we have a position statement on diversity, and you can check that out on the web. We also have been working to amplify voices in various aspects of the digital media. And we are encouraging organizers to use a best practices in inclusive scientific meetings. And so this is a document that came out to help people who are convening the symposia and the people who are leading the question and answer time to be inclusive and supportive as possible. And then other things that we're doing is we are advocating for safe space training for the conference center staff, and we're working on bystander training for the society staff and leadership. There's lots of us that have signed up for this. There's 2 sessions running over the summer. And then things like what Sterling is doing with leading ally training and various things at the conference to help the broader community do what it can to support typically marginalized people. All of this comes together to let you know that ASPB leadership is regularly discussing whose voices are not being heard, whose voices need to be amplified. We're working to remove barriers to inclusion across the whole society, various things from awards to talks to feeling welcome and supported at the conference. And I hope that you will feel comfortable asking us questions and talking to us about what we can do to best help you feel welcomed at ASPB. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Now I'd like to invite Sarah Black, who's the ASPB Vice President of Content and Communication. Sarah will share some logistical information that you might find helpful as you continue to plan or decide to come to Savannah. Sarah, if you don't mind taking it away.
Sure. All right, here I am. Okay, so we have just a few details that might be helpful as folks are making decisions about coming to Savannah. So there's a lot of details here, but I'll run through them quickly. For folks concerned about getting around Savannah or curious about that, as part of your Plant Biology 23 registration, we have arranged for transportation via water taxis and buses, both across the river from the convention center to the downtown Savannah area and where most of the convention hotels are, and around Savannah. So that's provided to all attendees as part of your registration. We'll also have gender neutral bathrooms throughout the conference venue. And we've gotten some really great guidance from oSTEM in particular about things to be mindful of in that. So we really appreciate their partnership with that. and their guidance. We'll have pronoun buttons and badges available to everyone. The LGBTQ plus Plant Science Community Network will be supported and represented with both formal events on the plant biology program and informal after hours offsite events. So people can choose which kinds of events they'd like to be at. We will be displaying the ASPB Code of Conduct throughout the venue to make sure that people are aware that it exists, but also so that, we can have that kind of passive reminder about the expectations that we have of all attendees. And last, we will be, last but not least, we'll be including a list of LGBTQ friendly restaurants and businesses on the conference blog at plantbiology.aspb.com, as well as on site to attendees so that they can, again, make choices about where they would like to spend their time in Savannah.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. That all sounds great. So with that, I'd like to then introduce Dusty Church. Dusty is our local person in Savannah. They're born in Southern California, but they moved to Savannah in 2015. Now, since they've been in Savannah for a while, they've led both LGBT organizations such as Savannah Pride, as well as the First City Pride Center. They've developed no-cost mental and behavioral health programs and large cultural community events like Savannah Pride and Stonewall Block Party. Dusty currently serves as the chair of the board for First City Pride Center, vice president of The Current, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan investigative news organization, and is a board member for Visit Savannah. Dusty will share more information with you about LGBT-friendly spaces and local resources in Savannah. The floor is yours, Dusty.
Thank you, and I just want to say thank you, first of all, for all of the time and energy that ASPB has put into engaging with the community, asking questions, and working with us. I certainly speak for a number of the folks who are not here in saying that it's been greatly appreciated. I know that it's been commented multiple times to me by folks who really appreciated the investment, personal investment that's been made to learn about our community. I'll start jumping in. Really just kind of tell you a little bit about the organizations that I work with. First City Pride Center is 6 years old. That's our baby. We founded the center really as a volunteer-run organization, trying to get the various groups in the community to kind of organize around a central mission to serve the basic needs of those who are most marginalized within the LGBT community here. And it's turned into something bigger than I think we really imagined. We kind of imagined a safe space where groups could meet and gather, and what has become is one of the only known that we're aware of paid practicum facilities for LGBT training for mental and behavioral health services. We run a no-cost mental and behavioral health program in partnership with Georgia Southern here that offers clinical services open 40 hours a week. We also have the largest trans support group with more than 70 regularly joining members. I should note that it's more than a support group. That often sounds very clinical. It is a community that hosts all sorts of wonderful activities, from clothing exchanges and potlucks and other gatherings. That's really been a great place for folks to gather. And then beyond that, you have Savannah Pride, Stonewall, Alcoholics Anonymous, and other programs. There's dozens of programs that operate out of the organization that provide direct client services, as well as community building, art, and cultural events. So it's a wonderful place, and we're very proud of where we've come. We also are very proud to have helped to lead the way in advancing the first non-discrimination protections, inclusive trans and LGBT inclusive more broadly, non-discrimination protections in a community outside of Metro Atlanta in the state. And that passed in 2020. And so we've done a lot to make some significant changes to the community. I also sit on the board for Visit Savannah, which is initially how I became engaged with everyone as the conference planning was happening. And I sit on the board representing this organization, the First City Pride Center, because part of what we've changed is the way that the city wants to be seen. And the city has made a significant effort in the way that they present their the community to make sure that it's inclusive of the LGBT community, and so that's certainly part of it. I also sit as vice chair of the board for The Current, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan investigative newsroom here in Savannah. thecurrentga.org, if you're interested in some of the stories that we put together. That organization is focused on government accountability, as well as telling the stories of communities that are often neglected by mainstream news sources. So really a wonderful place to find additional information about Savannah and what's happening if you're interested in that. The basics of the community, it's a great place to live. I moved from Los Angeles. I went to UCLA there. I certainly have a very deep understanding of what it's like to go from a major metro inclusive city to the Deep South. I won't pretend like that doesn't present some challenges, but Savannah is unique as far as the residents, and particularly downtown, in part because of the Savannah College of Art and Design, which is an extraordinarily queer art school. We as an organization, First City Pride Center, do a lot of work with the students there. And so there is a bit of a different demographic than you would typically find in what is a relatively small town relative to Los Angeles, certainly in the South here in Savannah. But there's some challenges, of course, just because our local residents are very queer. It's probably actually the most queer city I've ever lived in, but just because the residents are very queer doesn't mean that our visitors are, and doesn't mean that our visitors are always inclusive. So we certainly recognize that the challenges that come along with being a popular tourist destination in the region, and what that means for sometimes individuals who may not understand the culture of our city and may not recognize the expectations of being part of our community. So with that, I'll kind of jump in and just share my screen to show you a couple of resources that are available. And let's see, I always work in teams, so give me a second. It takes me a moment to figure out how to do this. There we go. All right. So on the firstcitypridecenter.org website, right at the top here, you can see both a resource directory and a business directory. Resource directory is going to be services, so health services and anything that you might need in the community should you find yourself in need. So crime, domestic violence, housing, all sorts of support. If anybody, medical providers, mental behavioral health services, if anybody finds that they need direct services, those are available here. And then we have a business directory with a downloadable PDF that will outline a number of businesses in the area. Now, I should note that this is not every queer inclusive business. These are the ones that have taken the time to fill out our form and allow us to go through a vetting process with them to make sure that we can put them on here. Savoy Society, as an example, is my local hangout. It's a bar downtown that is really, frankly, the unofficial gay bar. It's queer bartenders and a lot of gays hang out there, but it's not on this list. So I don't want to imply that any place that's not on here is not an inclusive space, but certainly there is a long list of spaces on here that are either queer owned or queer friendly. Additionally, there are, there we go. There's some additional opportunity resources here throughout Georgia. Out Georgia is the gay chamber, or the LGBT chamber in the state of Georgia is based in Atlanta. So the number of Savannah-based resources, and particularly business resources, is more limited here than on the center's website. But if you're traveling the state, if you're going through Atlanta, if you're deciding to spend a couple of days in other areas of the state, this is a wonderful resource to find queer inclusive spaces, resources, and businesses. There is also, if you're not familiar with refugerestrooms.org, refugerestrooms.org is a wonderful place when traveling in general to identify gender inclusive restrooms. So if you're looking for spaces that are all gender restrooms, this is a wonderful place to find those. And this list is fairly comprehensive. I again won't say that it includes every single space, but it includes a large number of spaces. And you can see down at the bottom, there's a pretty long list of locations where individuals can find a restroom that is not gendered. And then I just wanted to mention one last thing in terms of resources. I noted earlier that we do have a comprehensive non-discrimination ordinance here in the city of Savannah that includes not just housing and employment, but also public services. So if you happen to encounter discrimination in any public accommodation, by going to the city website and just simply searching discrimination, let's spell it right first. Wow, look at me type. You'll find an unlawful discrimination complaint form. We do encourage individuals, certainly the center does, if there is a need, to make sure that it is notified to the city so the city can investigate that. And then, of course, I would note that the First City Pride Center is a space where you can come in to seek support for completing this form, as well as support connecting with services. So we have a LGBT liaison for the police department and other city resources should that be needed. And I think that's most of what I wanted to cover with you guys. So I'll hand it back over.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dusty. So before we get to the floor for a community discussion during today's group with the audience, I'd also like to briefly introduce Jamie Gonzalez, who's oSTEM's Director of Community Relations and Events. Jamie has served as the Director of Community Relations and Events out in STEM since 2022, and she assists with the planning and coordination of large-scale in-person and virtual events. Outside of oSTEM, Jamie has also served on the planning team for the annual Gender Infinity Conference in Houston, Texas. Jamie, if you'd like to give a few words.
Hi, Jamie Gonzalez, she, her pronouns, glad to be here today. To share just a little bit more about Out in STEM, just in case if you haven't heard of it. It is a 501c3 nonprofit professional association for LGBTQ people in STEM. Some of the main things that we do to support the community is host an annual conference. We host a professional development summit for early career professionals. We do scholarships, and we have grad application funding support as well. So we are used to hosting conferences where we need to be thinking about the safety of our attendees. And I just want to validate that it can be really hard to hold the two truths of kind of what Sarah was talking about around being in a state or a place where maybe you're not feeling validated and safe. And the struggle of people who also live in the South, like me, in Houston, are like, oh, there's so many opportunities and extra barriers that we have to face when people aren't hosting things for our community locally. And so I just want to thank ASPB for bringing us into the conversation around what are some things that can be done proactively to be thinking about your safety. So I'm happy to be here to be a thought partner as concerns are brought up and if there are any questions. Our CEO and executive director, Lillian Martinez, who uses she, her pronouns, will also be at the conference and be tabling. So you'll have an opportunity to meet her and to learn more about oSTEM and just know that, as I'm trying to remember, I think Leanne mentioned like that there is a person in that space. Our executive director will be proudly rocking the oSTEM gear. So if there's just someone else besides Sterling, besides somebody already in your organization that you wanted to bring something to, she will be on site as well. But happy to join in on the conversation. And if anybody has any questions, happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. So with that, we'll open up the community discussion part of today's talk. So the first question we have, we've got 3 scripted ones, and then after that, well, I shouldn't say scripted, 3 planned ones, and then after that, we'll open up for the wider community to ask questions. So the first question is, where can we find resources after this webinar to help folks prepare for travel to Savannah? And Sarah, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. Well, the ASPB's conference blog at, again, plantbiology.aspb.org will be a great place to find some of the prepared resources that we'll have. And actually, we'll go ahead and ask Dusty to send over some of the links to some of the great things that he was sharing so that we can add them to a blog post there. So that'll probably be a great first stop. And again, there's a restaurant guide that we'll have there as well. So I think our conference website will be definitely a destination for those who are curious. And then, of course, if there's anything more niche that you're looking for, or maybe personal, by all means, you can feel comfortable to reach out to me, or anybody here from ASPB, and we will help connect you with the right people if we don't have access to those resources.
Excellent, thank you. And then also, Jamie, for oSTEM, what kind of resources do you guys normally have for sharing with attendees?
Yeah, and are you speaking specifically for like the travel conference resources?
Yeah, both for traveling and then also just how they might prepare once they get there.
Yeah, so usually we're trying to see if we could find something around like a LGBTQ in the know, like travel guide, and I can't remember, I don't think we have found that, but I know we if we find that, I think that will definitely be shared with everyone. And then I think as far as, I think just maybe talking to anybody that you know in a city that that you're traveling to. So if you know anybody who has kind of been to that airport and has had any experiences with it, I think particularly when we're thinking about like maybe our trans community members that may have concerns around TSA and security, try to do any outreach. And if you need support getting connected to someone, reach out to staff@ostem.org, and we can reach out to our network as well and see if we can find individuals that have been to local airports so they can give you kind of that heads up of like how to prepare for that situation. But yeah, and we'll be sure to share more. I don't have any at this time.
Thank you, Jamie. And we can open this up for the rest of the panelists. If you have anything else you'd like to kind of bring up here for how folks might prepare for traveling to Savannah.
Well, I'll just note that, so for me, I travel every week for work. I'm on a couple of flights every week, unfortunately, and I travel through Atlanta intentionally as a hub for me. It's a very queer inclusive community in Atlanta, and I've found it to be a space that relative to some airports that I've been in, it is a relatively comfortable place to travel through. So if you have to choose a place to route, that's usually a pretty easy one to get through. Delta obviously is an inclusive company, and that's an easy hub to get you through. And the Savannah airport's very easy. So just from a convenience factor, it's an easy one to manage.
All right, well, thank you. Kristen or Leanne, anything you'd like to add?
I can't think of anything, but thank you for asking.
I don't have anything to add, but I have a question for Sarah related to this. So Sarah, you mentioned that we're organizing transportation kind of in and around Savannah more than just to and from the conference center. Is there going to be suggestions for transportation from the airport to the hotel area?
We can work on that. I don't know of any plans for airport to hotel transportation at this time, but we can raise that with the relevant parties, and we'll make sure that we make a community announcement about what people can expect there.
Yeah, okay, thank you for clarifying. The Savannah airport was really easy, and there were lots of taxis waiting right outside, or Uber or Lyft. I found it super comfortable and easy when I flew into Savannah a few months ago to then get to the downtown area where the hotels were.
I will just note that the Savannah airport, there are non-gendered bathrooms, but the restrooms that are available there are in the lounge. So unfortunately, the restrooms more broadly are gender specific, but there is a lounge that doesn't matter what airline you fly, but if you have an American Express, you can go into. I don't quite understand, but in any case, there are the gender inclusive restrooms there. Could you be able to access them? So you're aware.
All right, well, fantastic. Thank you for that. So we had another question about, by attending plant biology, what are my tourism dollars supporting? So folks are worried that about going to the Deep South, particularly Georgia, where there is a lot of bad legislation against LGBT folks. And so how does actually spending money in a state like Georgia, how does that, can that possibly be used to help folks at all? And so folks from ASPB and from local Savannah, if you don't mind commenting on that.
I can take a stab, and thank you for the question. You know, it's not only the more recent laws that are targeting members of the LGBTQ+ community that have given ASPB pause in terms of what the Georgia state legislature is doing. A couple of years ago, a bunch of laws were passed that were perceived to curtail access to voting, particularly for marginalized ethnic populations. So we've been thinking and worrying about what all of this means, not only for our community, but also for the community, the people in Savannah. And after a couple of rounds of deliberation, as you all know, we've committed to holding plant biology in Savannah, Georgia. Part of what convinced us was a video message from the mayor of Savannah, Van Johnson, who argued passionately that by coming to the city, which, as Dusty has already described, is in fact a very diverse and welcoming place. We're helping to support a city that is a bastion of progressiveness in a state that otherwise arguably is not. I'm also mindful of comments that Stacey Abrams made when these laws were being passed, essentially arguing that when organizations like ASPB stay away, we're harming communities that are directly supporting conferences, you know, in her case, perhaps in Atlanta, in our case this year in Savannah. So all of the folk who are involved in beyond ASPB and making conferences happen, the people who are working in hotels and restaurants, all of them are directly helped when an organization like ASPB holds its convention in the city.
And I'll speak just from having at one point supported boycotts of other states when I lived in California, and we are under attack. There's no question about it. It is horrifying what we're seeing, particularly in southern states. And at the same time, we do have SCAD here, Georgia Southern Armstrong campus, Savannah State, which is a HBCU. An hour away, we have Georgia Southern's main campus. We have a number of universities in this area. We have hospital systems, and our community is still here. And somebody mentioned earlier that there's a lot of barriers that exist already that the state seeks to place in front of us. The Georgia Education Panel just recently started stripping away language that applies to our community and diversity out of textbooks for education. And it's hard to sit in this space and see those opportunities evaporate because those are the opportunities that we're clinging to already in the state, and to see others in professional settings begin to pull back and make it even more difficult to access those opportunities is very frustrating and challenging. And so I do appreciate ASPB's willingness to consider our community. It is a time for a lot more barriers in front of us as a community than ever, and having a conference that's more easily accessible is going to mean a lot.
Thank you, Dusty. Jamie, if you'd like to go.
Well, I was thinking about kind of additional resources, because I think a lot of what you're hearing is that we anticipate that you may have a smooth process and travel getting there. And I think maybe some of the fears, just like, what if not? And so one of the things that I would recommend is that I recommend Thrive Lifeline. They are a text chat support group. A lot of them actually are queer people in STEM, just kind of by chance. And so if you just happen to find yourself in a situation that has rattled you a bit, but you are traveling alone and you need that maybe just immediate support of someone to kind of like get you to that next space where you can actually get to the conference. So I can share their number in the chat, but I highly recommend Thrive Lifeline. Just if you are in a situation, it doesn't have to be crisis, but say just something happened, you wanted to process it in a space. They are someone that you could text, and if you needed to call, it would just be someone that kind of that like you have in your back pocket, even if you're traveling alone, that you have someone that you can reach out to even kind of before you get to the conference, because it may be at an airport that's your local airport and it's not the one even in Georgia yet, but you need just like something in your back pocket, people that that will be there if you need to reach out. So I'll share that information as well. So I know I'm going back a question, but I just remember that I wanted to share that one as well.
Thank you, Jamie. And also you had touched on earlier about living in Houston or being based in Houston, and kind of seeing some of like the state very legislating against the local community. I was wondering if you could comment on that at all, and maybe that's similar to our situation here.
Yeah, our governor, I think last night in Texas, signed several bills. One of them is that I don't think funding is allowed to be used for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives at public institutions. And so we're actually wondering, does that mean that our LGBTQ resource center, like at the local levels, like won't be allowed? So there's just so much unknown. And then that's kind of broader. And then we have some like particularly for like our trans community around athletics and healthcare. So yes, it very much for people on the ground feels like attacks, and it's exhausting. And I don't know, for some people, like there might be going into special sessions. So it's like never knowing like exactly even when it's going to end. So and I think the part that like breaks my heart, like being in a state where this is happening, is that granted, it doesn't matter. Houston is like, we had a a queer mayor for many, many years, and the grassroots activism happening on the ground here is amazing. And I just know not everyone has the resources to get out to California or Seattle. And, so yeah, like I said, just I hear when people are, especially if you're not in a southern state and you're like, oh, I don't want to be spending money to go and support this state. Think about when you get here, finding those locally LGBTQ owned businesses, minority owned in general. So whether that is BIPOC owned, any type of underrepresented communities that are being attacked, seek those out, see how you can support. I believe that ASPB, and I'm sorry if y'all already said this, was going to be looking at the local organizations, and it might be Indigenous based, which, like I said, any community that is being attacked at this point is worth kind of like putting those dollars in. So it's not just about like the state and the government, but those local organizations and grassroots people on the ground, making sure that they're not forgotten either.
Just to add to Jamie, that was wonderful. And I do want to know, because I didn't add it to the resources that are available, that both Visit Savannah has information on Black-owned businesses. And there's a website called upliftsavannah.com that is a Black-owned business directory. And we are a majority Black city, and certainly identifying Black-owned businesses is appreciated as well.
One thing I forgot to say is about the ASPB community more generally, and recognizing that there are literally dozens of states that are seeking to or enacting bills like the ones that Dusty and Jamie have described in Georgia and Texas. As an organization, if we limit ourselves to holding conferences in only those states that are more welcoming of everybody, we're in effect disenfranchising, making it harder for folk to attend our meetings from other parts of the country. I know that other organizations, including oSTEM, find ways to deal with that particular issue. We've yet to figure that out, and it seems likely that we're going, in order to spread the meeting around the country, we're going to find ourselves in states that, like Georgia, that are not as welcoming as we would like them to be.
And to also, because like I said, we're talking about two truths here, where that is absolutely a truth, and it is validating kind of your members, kind of maybe fear around that. And I think what is great about the leadership and what they're looking for here today is share what your concerns are and your fears. If you need support on the ground, ask for that. And so then that way, any type of barriers that you're facing, and oSTEM, we hire some like mental health professionals to be on the ground at the site. And so that might look different than y'all support, but if there are things that you want to advocate before, I think what the beautiful part about this discussion is that the leaders want to hear what kind of actions that you would want for them to take, and so they can take that in consideration for this year and future years.
Thank you, Jamie, Dusty, and Crispin. Sarah and Leanne, if you don't have anything to add, we'll continue on to the next. Okay. So one more question that we have is, how can I connect, or how can attendees connect with other LGBT attendees at the meeting? And so I can start with this one. So we will have we'll have a formal meeting from noon to 12:45 on the Sunday of the conference in the Innovation Pavilion. And so we'll have a very brief introduction, but then mostly allow folks to be able to meet and greet each other. And it's early enough in the conference where you can make friends, you can meet other folks, and still be able to hang out with them later. The evening of that Sunday, we'll be going out to a local LGBT owned or affiliated restaurant or bar, preferably someplace that has non-alcoholic options, so all of our community is able to attend and is able to be feeling welcome there. And then we'll also be having an LGBT allies training session, so folks who want to become better allies for the LGBT community are able to attend. They can also meet other folks who want to become better allies there as well. And so hopefully with all of these events, as well as with our Twitter or any other social media we're working on, we can help the attendees connect with other folks and make it feel like a very welcoming and supportive place for everyone. If other folks would like to chime in.
Thank you, Sterling. I'll add that we're also trying to be more intentional to support first-time conference attendees. So one of the things that we have heard is that people are really hesitant to go up and talk to people. And if you really want to get the most out of the conference, you need to take advantage of the informal networking opportunities to chat about your work, your interest, to find mentors, or just even have a great conversation about your science. And so on the Saturday of the conference, before the opening plenary symposium, we're going to have a chance for first-time attendees to get a little brief orientation, and there will be several of the leadership team there so that we can personally say, yes, please talk to me, it's okay. And also ASPB does badge type things like Sterling mentioned, so that you can identify people that you might have a connection to. You can look up people's science on the app so that you can be ready to say, oh, I read that you're studying this aspect of plant biology. That gives you a little bit of an in, and then you can chat with them about other things that you're interested in related to why we're all there together.
Thank you, Leanne. Would anyone else have any other ideas or events that might be going on?
Not an event, and this is just to lift up one of the positives that emerged from an earlier conversation among most of us. This and Sarah mentioned how helpful oSTEM's input and guidance has been already, and down to some fairly specific ideas and concepts. But Dusty, you had sort of mentioned leveraging your position with First City Pride and your role on the board of Visit Savannah to see about getting some training for folk who work at the convention center. Is that something that is going to be happening? This is not ASPB specific, obviously. This is to aimed at improving the welcoming nature of the convention center for everyone.
Yeah, we're still working on getting schedules lined up. They're certainly receptive at this point, and that's obviously a lift to identify staffing schedules and coordinate that. But it is absolutely something we're working on to provide safe space training to the staff at the convention center.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to comment? And if not, we can open up the floor to questions by the audience. All right, well, if not, if anyone in the audience has a question, you can either, I think, unmute or put it into the chat. Or Jason, are there any questions that are currently already lined up?
I haven't seen any question come in, but at this point, we don't have any question kind of pre-lineup, or I've been monitoring my email to just see if folks are asking questions, and I haven't gotten any at this point. But I guess at this point, I think we could open the floor while waiting for some more questions to come in. Since we do have a few minutes left, we could maybe open the floor for anything that that we would want to emphasize on, that we discuss and kind of re-highlight for folks. Since this webinar is going to be recorded and shared across our community, I think this would be a really helpful resources afterwards. And so I think a lot of our folks, and especially those that are part of our community, are often going back to this webinar, rewatching, and really pulling out information that they'll find helpful. So and before we wrap up, if there are no other questions, I want to kind of open up the floor for everyone for any kind of final thoughts or anything that would anybody would like to share to continue to inform members of our community, especially those that are part of the LGBTQ community. So I want to open the floor, and hopefully your kind of thoughts will trigger some questions for those that are still kind of tuning in live. But otherwise, we'll continue collecting questions and try to answer them in some capacity. And as we mentioned, we're putting together kind of an informational blog that kind of provide as much information as possible. And so we'll address any questions that may come up afterwards, and we'll continue to do that as well. But with that said, I want to, I guess, at this point, just invite anybody who would like to share any parting thoughts or message of support for those that are looking to and still thinking about deciding and as to whether or not participating in Savannah, going to the conference, or really just those who are trying to be more active in their work in the field, but are hesitant to travel or attend the conference just for various reasons. So with that said, I want to open the floor for everybody.
And in particular, since we have so many folks involved in so many different things in this panel, what are some resources maybe that would be helpful to share that could be accessed by folks who would be listening to this in the future?
I think we sort of covered the resources in one of the earlier slides, right? So, and I'm sure that the blog post that Jason just referenced will include links. We've got a new one in the chat, the Thrive Lifeline. Thank you for that, Jamie. And you know, I guess to sort of pivot back to Jason's question, I'd just like to lift up something that Leanne said, and that's basically talk to us. Talk to us now if you have concerns or are worried about your safety getting to or being in Savannah. And if you do come, and we'd love to see you, do please approach us at the convention center or at the hotels or wherever you might bump into us in the city. We are here to help, and it is absolutely the Society's commitment to make everyone feel safe and welcome as far as we possibly can.
Thank you, Crispin. If anyone else would like to go.
What kind of pops to the top of my mind is try to, even if you're an introvert and you don't love to go to the networking things, I hear you. But there is something around, like, if you can go and meet a few people, even if you're going by yourself, just so then that way, if you do want to venture out, that maybe you have one or two people to go with you. And sometimes that can make that not just feel safe, but be safer. And so kind of putting yourself out there, meeting people in those spaces that I believe Sterling had mentioned earlier, where you could, people that you know are like-minded or share identities, and they're going to be in it with you. And so sometimes that can also help us feel a little bit more comfortable, especially if you're a first comer and this is your first conference. So I recommend doing that, even though it can feel uncomfortable. It can be worth it.
Thank you, Jamie. Dusty?
I was just going to second that from obviously different industry. I work in the hospitality industry, but I've been speaking at and attending conferences for a number of years professionally, and there's very little that I have gained more from than the interactions at the conferences. Those relationships, the mentorships, the ability to learn from others and their approach to the work that we do is tremendously valuable, and frankly more valuable than anything I ever have received out of sessions at a conference. So it's not always easy, but it's absolutely worth it.
And I'll add a little bit to that because ASPB is really about supporting the plant biology community as a whole. So yes, the conference is an important venue for us to talk about the plant biology that we do, the science that we do. But one of the things that I love about this society is that we also have advice for getting a job. We have vendors to let you check out things that you might want to try in your lab, or books that might be useful for things that you want to learn. We have opportunities to just talk and be in person with each other, so that you can talk to somebody who is or has been the president of the society and hear their story and their career trajectory, and find out that there is no one set mold of what it means to be a plant biologist, and that all of us bring a unique perspective, and we bring ideas about how we're going to use our fascination with plants to support other people and to push the science forward and make this a thriving community. So the more that you engage with all of the activities of what the conference has to offer, the more that you'll see that ASPB really does have our best interest, our whole interest as plant biologists in mind.
And one last thought over here is, this webinar was really inspired by direct feedback from the community. And so, we are listening and we are paying attention, and, we really appreciate the people who speak up and tell us what they need. So, if there are other things that you need, if there are other concerns that we can address, we're here and listening to the community to do that. So, we're glad to be able to provide the support like this. And, obviously, thanks everyone on the panel for being here. So.
Well, thank you, everyone. We have not received any questions, but we're all available after the seminar or this webinar to answer questions, get feedback. If you contact us through email, I'm sure everyone will respond. But otherwise, if anyone has any final comments, speak now. Otherwise, we'll adjourn, and I'll like to thank a few folks. Any last comments? All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending, both in the audience as well as the panel. Dusty, who's in Savannah, Jamie, who's in Texas, Crispin, who's the ASPB president, Sarah Black from ASPB, as well as Leanne, who's the president-elect. And then especially big thank you to Jason, who's done a great job coordinating everyone, getting everyone in the same boat, as well as getting this webinar put together and advertised. So thank you very much. And with that, thank you all for attending.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.